Well, welcome to another episode of The Art of Feminine Negotiation. I'm your host, Cindy Watson, and I'm really excited to introduce you today to Dr. Andrew Hahn. And we're going to be talking about negotiating from a really centered place to be able to get more of what you want. So, welcome, Andrew. It's so great to have you here.
It's great to be here, and I'm so looking forward to this. I can't begin to tell you. So
Yes, I am excited to hear what nuggets you have for us. And for those of us who don't know, Dr. Andrew Hahn, he's a Harvard graduate, he's a licensed clinical psychologist, and he is the founder of life-centered therapy, which I'm really interested to hear about. In 1985, he became a professor in the graduate counseling program at Lesley University and a clinical training director. And his work profoundly changed in the 90s when he discovered a new way of understanding life and healing trauma, all of which is important to help you stay grounded so you can get more out of life. So tell us a little bit, why don't we kick it right off, Andy? What is life-centered therapy and how did you come to discover it?
life-centered therapy is a way of understanding why people get stuck and how to get unstuck. That's it in a nutshell. And I can explain that to you. And if you want to be able to negotiate, clearly you have to be in a place where you're not stuck someplace, because if you are, you won't be fully engaged. You won't be fully open. So basically, the idea of this in a nutshell is there's only one reason that people get stuck. And it's that there's something that can't be handled or taken in stride. If you could handle it, everything, then no matter what anybody did to you, you could just be fully resourced.
Okay.
Okay, so all that healing is, if we're going to start there, is mastering what can't be handled. That's all it is. Any
Okay.
therapy, any healing is just mastering what can't be handled. And if you
Well,
want, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Yeah, I'd love you to talk about that because I often say that negotiating our mindset is our first and most important negotiation. So it sounds like this is very aligned. So I'd love if you could give us some practical advice for, how do you negotiate that mindset so that you can get unstuck and handle those feelings so you can show up more powerfully to get more of what you want out of life.
I can certainly tell you that. So the way you do it is when there's something that can't be handled, in that moment, a discomfort is born.
Yeah.
And you unconsciously identify with it and you start living out its story over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example of a mindset problem with a woman who's an entrepreneur. She comes to us and she's having terrible difficulty ever closing calls, and she's
Yeah.
making a couple of $1,000s a month, and she's thinking she has to stop.
Yeah.
And we're going to work on her mindset. And it turns out when we focus on her stuckness, she feels something in her body, like her whole throat is closing up. And we have her focus on throat closing, like she's going to become throat closing. She has this very vivid memory of being a 14-year-old girl and being horrendously bullied. And it's what happens is that she's that 14-year-old girl, and when she goes to make these calls, she sees her potential clients as potential bullies that she has to accommodate to, and she loses her own sense of center, and she's in such fear that she'll try to accommodate them any way possible so she won't get hurt.
Yeah.
We take care of that in one session. The way you do it is you find that girl who is throat closing up, and she gets to tell her story. And then we did a very simple practice, and it just resolved. And her next 8 calls, she closed 6 of them, and her income went from $2,000 a month to $8,000 a week.
Wow.
Just from changing her mindset around a trauma structure around being bullied.
Okay.
And I can tell you story after story like that. So if you want to change, all you have to do is find the one who is truly traumatized, will be a body sensation. And the second you choose to bring all your awareness there, you no longer unconsciously live out their story. You consciously choose to become them in the same way an actress would be choosing to become a role.
Yeah.
And you say, I'm here with you, and I bear witness to you, and I'm holding you, but I'm not you, and I'll give you whatever you need. And then watch what happens. Worlds open up to you.
No, this is interesting. Like when you talk about that change, because we often hear that if we want our life to change, we need to change, and people typically don't know where to start. So go a little deeper on this, because I think for a lot of people, they're not used to this idea that you're saying about bring your awareness to where it is in your body. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going, well, how do I know what that trauma is? So tell us a little bit about that.
In the case that we're talking about, the simplest way to do it, you can start in one of 2 ways. You can start where you're stuck, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, this person is saying, I can't finish phone calls, I mean, I can't ever land anything. I get anxious. So I could say to them, when you fully allow, this is a simple version of this. When you fully allow how anxious you are, what do you feel in the body? Scan your body, and you'll start to say, oh my goodness, my throat's closing up.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to say something interesting. I'm going to say, Cindy, you're not anxious. Someone whose name is throat closing up is anxious. It can't be you. Your little toe is feeling fine. So
Yeah.
it isn't you in the here and now, but
Yeah.
it's someone whose name is throat closing up. So what you're going to do is you're going to choose to become throat closing up. And
Yeah.
then you won't unconsciously act out its story anymore, but we'll find out who it is. And in this case, we found out it was a 14-year-old girl and not a 29-year-old woman.
Yeah.
And the 14-year-old girl was running the show. But the second she chose to bring all her attention there and said, I'm here with you, you can share your story. We'll give you what you need so you'll feel safe. She
Yeah.
was free. So
And when you say they can share their story, like, is it literally just then once you identify where it is in the body, you identify sort of the triggering trauma that's sort of causing that sensation. And then what you talk about that trauma, is that like, how does it release at that stage? Is it just the bringing the awareness to it, or is it then expressing your experience of it?
it's her expressing her experience of it.
Yeah.
You will no longer be unconsciously identified with her. So you were when that woman was
Yep.
making these phone calls. She's a 14-year-old girl. She doesn't know that. She didn't
Yep.
remember the scene, right?
Yeah.
You bring your attention to throat closing up, and suddenly what happens, you say, oh my gosh, I'm in a playground and I'm being afraid because all these people are coming at me and they're all going to
Yeah.
bully me, right?
Yeah.
So really what you're doing is you're, in a sense, letting her share her story, and whatever comes to you, whatever you're experiencing, feeling, imagining, will be not you, it will be
Yeah.
her. Everything you say is literally her story, and
Yeah.
you can't step outside of the process.
It's
And
beautiful.
so she'll express her story and you'll say, oh, I'm remembering you.
Yeah.
And it's like a part of you that had been dismembered and split off that
Yeah.
you're identifying with. Suddenly you remember, and it goes back into its pure form, which is energy. And suddenly you'll say, this is really weird. My throat is feeling great.
Yeah.
And it's because she'll stop being throat closing up, which is matter, dense
Yeah.
energy, and she'll go back into her pure form, which is, and she'll reintegrate with you. You will remember her literally, and suddenly your throat's going to feel fine. And then magically,
Yeah.
calls start to change, and you don't have to do anything different because
That's
you're
beautiful.
no longer the 14-year-old, you're the 29-year-old who's fully resourced and had done everything right, except that she didn't know that the mindset was the 14-year-old girl being bullied.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think mindset is at the core of everything. And yet, people go off and spend inordinate amounts of money on doing things, but they don't do that inner piece first, right? That inner work. So,
Right. Well, we found that with all kinds of entrepreneurs who try to negotiate.
yeah.
It's that they don't know that they're stuck someplace, and all they have to do is feel the anxiety or the suffering that they're
Yeah.
feeling, scan their body, notice what's there, and say, I'm going to bring all my attention there. So I'm going to choose to become that other person from the inside out. But now I'm
Yeah.
choosing it.
That's
And
beautiful.
I will tell you, you can do the work on your own, and you don't have to spend hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars. Literally, we can train you how to do it for yourself in a minute, and you will get, I can tell you this, better results than if you spend thousands of dollars trying to change your mindset
Yeah.
without focusing in the body.
That's beautiful. So, I mean, showing up with confidence is obviously key in negotiations. So, I know a lot of the work that you do as well is around how to increase that self-esteem to get better outcomes. So, what advice do you have for our listeners or our viewers out there who are going, I just have trouble tapping into to show up with that confidence and self-esteem?
Well, the first thing I would do, where I would always start, is mindset.
Yeah.
So suppose you're stuck someplace, and
Yeah.
that's why you don't have the self-esteem. So you're an 8-year-old girl,
Yeah.
and you have this wonderful idea about what you want to do, and then someone looks at you funny and say, really?
Yeah.
And you take their voice inside of you because you don't want to lose them. So
Yeah.
suddenly you're saying, that's a stupid idea, but whose
Yeah.
voice is it really? It's your father's,
Yeah.
right? So why do you take that voice inside of you? It's a kind of protection,
Yeah.
because that way you never lose them
Yeah.
and you get to master it. But of course, you don't know that. So you think like, oh my gosh, I'm like killing myself. But you have to notice there's a relationship. I'm killing myself. Who's the I that's doing the killing? And it might be your father's voice.
Yeah.
And so what we could do is we could say, you know, that voice that you think is your voice? Well, it isn't really your voice. It's an 8-year-old girl who's traumatized, who's choosing to protect herself by taking her father inside of her.
Yeah.
because it's the best choice you could have made.
Yeah.
Or if you can't beat them, join them, right?
Yeah.
So then you could say, well, that was nice. You made the best choice you could have made when you were 8, but you're now 38 and you've been making the same choice for 30 years without being aware of it.
Yeah.
But you feel that protector, you can feel as a dense energy. So with that voice that says, that's a stupid idea, well, we could find out where it originated. In this case, you're 8 years old and your father looks at you funny and you say, I'm never going to do that again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you say, that sensation is that 8-year-old who's choosing to protect herself by becoming like her father, so she'll never lose her father's love and she'll never be abandoned, even though she's afraid of being abandoned. So you say, well, that's nice. What we're going to do is, since it was a choice to bring him in by an 8-year-old, we are going to choose to bring that sensation outside of us, which we can do because we chose to bring it in. We just weren't aware, we made a choice, right?
Yeah.
And then you can send it, you can channel loving energy into the dense energy. And what happens is you heal the 8-year-old, and the dense energy that's the protector just begins to go away, because you say to you, thank you. You probably saved my life by bringing, if I had ever really spoken up to my father, he might have slugged me.
Yeah.
So better I didn't do that, but I don't need you anymore. So thank you very much. And I'm going to let you go. And I will tell you, magic happens when you do that. So the first thing is mindset.
Beautiful.
The second thing, if you want to gain self-confidence, is if you're a woman, there are a few things you have to know how to do, which would take a little while to talk about, right?
Okay.
The first thing is you have to know how to speak to power.
Yeah.
You have to know that assertiveness and aggressiveness are not the same thing.
Yeah.
And I can share with you how to do all those things. Some of those are mindset questions. So another thing you might want to do is, you have to learn how to be direct and not manipulative. You have to know about hierarchy. There are all kinds of things you need to know about.
Let's unpack some of these for a second. So I love this because I totally agree with you. People confuse assertive and aggressive all the time. It is a huge pet peeve of mine. So I'd love for you to speak to that. What advice you have for how to be assertive without being afraid of being aggressive or manipulative?
Oh, well, the first thing is, of course, you'd have to work on your mindset.
Yeah.
So as soon as you're afraid of something, you're stuck someplace. Because if you weren't stuck someplace and you were fully resourced, basically, I'm going to tell you, everything is going to come back to mindset.
Yeah.
In some level, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Then you have to know what your particular blind spots are. And the way you can know your blind spots is if you know something about understanding people from the inside out, you'll know what your deepest fears are.
Mm.
And I use something called the Enneagram. And I think that there are 9 different types of people and 9 different types of women. And if you know which one you are, you'll know what motivates you. And if you know who you're working with, then you won't project onto them. You'll be able to know who they are from the inside out. And that is magical. Okay. And depending on your structure, right? Like if you are Golda Meir, your problem is in assertiveness. If you know Golda Meir, if you don't, the Minister of Israel. She was like a dynamo, right?
Yeah.
So, different women have different problems depending on what their personality types are.
Sure.
So there are models. I'll be quiet. You ask whatever you like.
No, that's great. Well, let's just unpack, because I'm sure some people are saying, what is Enneagram? That's probably a term that most people aren't familiar with. So when you say you use that, what does that mean?
The Enneagram is a wonderful system that is it's a sacred symbol, but it's really a map of life. But we can use it for understanding people. So the Enneagram, which is true of all of different mystical traditions, in Christian mystical tradition, Buddhist mystical tradition, they say there are 9 types of people. In Christian mystical tradition, they say the same thing, right? They say, there are all these people, and, it's like the 7 deadly sins. What are the 7 deadly sins? They are types of people, basically.
Yeah.
Plus what are called the 2 shock points, which are 9 types. Yeah. So all these systems say there are 9 different types of people. So does American psychology, except it says 8 of them have personality disorders, and one of them, because it's the core one called the performer, the most they say about that one is, type A personality with, features, but they don't, because our culture is, we're a performer culture. So if you know what type you are, you'll know what your gifts are, what your challenges are, and you'll know who you're negotiating with. And if you know who you're negotiating with and what motivates them and where their attention goes, you can do amazing things. Like, I can give you a simple example of that.
Yeah, I'd love that.
My co-author, who is an extraordinary woman who I could spend a lot of time telling you about, is a protector. And protectors are, what they care about is the truth and hierarchy and knowing what's most important, what's least important, and they're protectors. Her daughter was a heart point called a romantic. And one day, when she was just learning about the Enneagram, she, who's a protector, which is the 8th of the 9 types, made blueberry pancakes for her daughter because it was a daughter's special birthday. And her daughter says, "Mommy, I love these pancakes," and whatever. And so my co-author, whose name is Joni, was cleaning up, and she found all the pancakes thrown into a wastebasket.
Oh, gee.
And Joni, who cares about the truth more than anything, was about to say, "You lied to me. Why'd you deceive?" And then she said, "I know my daughter is a romantic. She's a heart woman." And she said, "Sweetheart, I'm imagining," go on, talk about negotiation.
Yeah.
"I bet you didn't want to hurt my feelings." And her daughter, whose name is Allie, said, "Yes, Mommy, I didn't want to hurt your feelings." Joni said, I really get it. But I want you to know, in my world, if you'd been able to tell me the truth, I could have made you the pancakes you really wanted. But I know what's most important for you was you wanted to treat me like I'm special, and you didn't want to hurt my feelings, because her daughter was like amazing, said, "Because you're a heart point and I'm not. I'm responsible and you're oriented towards feelings."
Yeah.
And they had the most amazing conversation, and it changed their whole relationship.
I love this. Yeah, go ahead. I think it's such a missing piece, because we treat everybody the same, right? We come in with this, people go through life with the same tactics, the same strategy, the same chest beating approaches, and it doesn't serve. So I think this is really powerful, because I talk a lot about, as part of the preparation process, to consider who you want to show up as, who the other party shows up as. But I wasn't familiar with this Enneagram. So I'd love, what are some of the other archetypes, if you will, right? We've got the protector, the romantic. What else?
I'll start with number 1 and I'll go around. So
all right.
It's the perfectionist,
yeah,
the giver, the performer, the romantic, the observer, the loyal skeptic, the epicure or the adventurer, the protector, and the mediator. Okay. And they're unusual archetypes because they're not just roles, but they're fundamental core lenses. Yeah. They're called core motivation. And it says there are 9 of them, and they split into 3 different categories called belly points, heart points, and head points.
Okay.
And we don't have a ton of time, so I'll just say what you need to know is there are 3 variations of 3 types of people. So if you're a heart point, you care about image, right? That's the mental issue. And despair is the emotional issue.
Okay.
So if you're a heart point, right, what you want to do is you want to create an image so that you will be approved of and liked, so that you don't have to feel despair. That's what you do. Okay. So your energy is going out towards other people. It's like, what do I have to do to get you to approve of me?
Yeah.
Do I have to take care of your needs? Do I have to be successful, or do I have to be special? Yeah. Okay. 3 variations. Then there are head points, and head points have the exact opposite issue. They say the world is a dangerous place, and I don't know what's I don't know friend from foe. So instead of going forward, they're saying you could be dangerous, so I have to make sure that I'm secure, right? Yeah. So, and you can go back and then observe and say, nothing's going to touch me. I'm just going to sit back here and analyze everything. That's called an observer. Yeah. Then there's a loyal skeptic, and a loyal skeptic basically says, yes, that's true, but what about this? Yes, that's true. So it's someone who lives with doubt and doubting their doubt, right? Yeah. And then there's what's called the adventurer, and the adventurer says, there's nothing to be afraid of. Life is just an adventure. Let's have great experiences. And you don't see the fear until they feel trapped. Yeah. And then they say, wait a second, like I'm feeling trapped here. Like, I'm feeling like you're trying to cause me pain and I got to get out of here. Sort of like Tom Sawyer, right? Or Huck Finn, who says, like, you're trying to trap me by making me paint the fence. Well, I'm not going to paint the fence. I'll tell all these guys, painting the fence is a game. We'll charge you money and then we'll go off fishing, because I'm not going to let myself feel this pain, right? And then there are belly points, and belly points basically say, instead of I feel, therefore I am, which is the heart points, or I think, therefore I am, which is the head points, belly points say I'm responsible, therefore I am. And so it's basically someone who says, I don't know my own heart, but I know how to respond to you. Yeah. And so I'll be responsible. And basically it says there are 3 variations of that. Right? I'm going to be responsible to an ethic. That's called a perfectionist. I don't know what I want, but I know what the right thing to do is. Or there's a protector, which says, I don't know what I want, but I know who has the power. And I know hierarchically what's important, and I can be the most competent person in the room. But that doesn't mean you want to be. That just means you know how to do everything. Or you can be the mediator, and that says, I want to create harmony. I don't know what I want, but I can see everybody else's point of view and I merge with them.
Yeah.
So if you know there are these 9 types, you can find out who it is you're negotiating
Yeah.
with. And if you know that, you can negotiate from a place of like real strength, because you'll say, I know exactly where they're coming from. And it doesn't take very long to figure out who you are and who they are. And then you'll know your gifts and you'll know your challenges and you'll know theirs, and the world becomes like remarkable. And I can tell you, I've saved CEOs literally hundreds of thousands of dollars just by saying, you think this is what's going on with this person because you think they're like you, but they're not. They just kind of behave like you.
Yeah.
And I can explain to them the difference.
So powerful. And particularly because we often approach it from a place of ego, right? A very egocentric approach. It's like what I see, what I think, how would I handle this? How would I want this? And I think you can move mountains when you turn the focus to the other person. And this is just such a great gift as a starting point to actually find out which of these archetypes do they represent and what will most appeal to them, because that's how you're going to get best outcomes, not by bullying through based on your own agenda. I think that's so brilliant. And I know you talk a lot about a simple healing process that people can do in minutes, and you'd mentioned earlier. I just want to clarify, so for our listeners, is that process you were talking about earlier where you tap in, or is this something different?
The simple healing process is when you tap in. It's to know that every discomfort is a living being who's come to share a story that was born in a moment. Just like, Cindy was born in a moment and has a story to share. Whenever something can't be handled, you could say, dense energy is to Cindy as Cindy is to life, right? Anything we identify with is going to be a limitation because we don't have any identity. So whenever we have like a discomfort, any discomfort is like a stuck place. And if all I could tell your audience ever was, whenever you're feeling anxious or judgmental or comparative or compulsive or anything, scan your body, find the sensation, bring all your attention there, and just say, what have you come to share with me? Worlds will open. And that will get you unstuck. Then you have to find out what's true for you. And I will tell you how I would do that if I were you. I would say you'll never know in your head. If you want to know what's true for you, you have to bring your attention to your gut. It's the part of you that just knows what's true. And then you bring your attention to the center of your chest. And that's the part that says, given what's true for me, I know what I truly desire. And what I do when I really want to know is I go and sit under a tree, if it's nice like it is today, and I say, I'll never figure it out. That will just have me spinning out into never, never land. I'll bring my attention down and into my gut and say, what's true for me? And given what's true for me, what do I want? And that's that in the heart.
And if somebody's not used to tapping into their gut, because I think that's there's new awareness around that, how would you suggest? Is that tied to that, trusting our deepest intuitive knowing? Like, I think intuition is a key element of negotiation. So
it's like just knowing. I'll tell you how, I explain this to women. Okay. Let's suppose you have a toddler, right? And God forbid, a car that weighs 2,000 pounds rolls over that toddler. And you pick up the car and you weigh 120 pounds. And I say to you, how could you do it? And you know what you'll say? You won't say, I figured it out. You won't say, I had a feeling about it. You just say, I just knew I could do it. What I'd say to you is, when you're in alignment with what's true for you, you literally feel stronger, and there's a visceral knowing. And that's that gut thing. So it's the same thing when you just know something is true. And the only way you can know it is to bring your attention down and into your belly. Because that's where that power is. And you literally will feel stronger when you're in alignment with it. You'll say, oh my gosh, I just feel yes. People will say, really? That's great. And you'll say, well, it may be crazy, but it's true for me, so I'm going to do it anyhow.
And I take it you would advocate then, it sounds like that'd be a great practice in advance of any negotiation. Just take those few moments to ground yourself and really tap into that gut, that inner truth to figure out sort of what it is that you actually want. What's your deep why going forward? Is that
would be true, unless, of course, when you try to do it, you start to get anxious. You say, I'm walking into the lion's den, so how can I do this? I'm going to bite my head off. At which point we'll say, we have a mindset problem again. So You're going to find that sensation in your body.
Yeah.
And I could teach you very simple practices. There are acupressure practices around fear, for example. So we're going to be in a podcast, so they can't see. But if you focus, if you're really afraid, like you say, oh my God, I'm going to walk into the lines, then how could I ever know? And you're like frozen, right? You could literally start to massage right around above on your forehead, the ends of your eyebrows, about an inch above them, while you focus on your fear and watch what happens. It will start to melt away.
On the outside of your eyebrows?
No,
Like,
on the top, right
yeah,
above on the forehead.
but outside your eyes, not the inside.
Right, on the outside, right above the ends of your eyebrows. And that's for fear.
Okay.
If you feel like you know, you're feeling like passive aggressive, for example, like you feel grudged out, but you can't really assert yourself.
Yeah.
You have a problem with unmetabolized anger. So you either become rageful or you become numb.
Yeah.
And if you want to metabolize your anger so you can really feel that you're angry, which sets boundaries, you could massage literally right next to your eyes, right here, like if you can see, literally right next to your eyes.
Yeah.
Right? That's great for that. It's called the anchor points. So there are these acupressure interventions you can do that supplement just listening to the body sensation.
Yeah.
And there's one for fear, there's one for anger, there's one for shame, there's one for all kinds of different things.
Beautiful.
And it supplements what you're doing. So
and is there one for anxiety, or is that, I know that's where you tap back in and do that sort of healing process, but is there also an acupuncture one for anxiety?
Anxiety, not necessarily, because anxiety could be a lot of different things. Because really, if you think about it, what's anxiety? Anxiety actually is a way not to feel fear.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it is. So, I mean, like if you think about what does anxiety do for you? It, in a funny way, it brings you outside of yourself. I'm anxious about something out there, right?
Yeah.
But really, if you go back in, you'd find that your anxiety is a way it's a way, you could say, to not have to feel something else.
Yeah.
So if you feel the anxiety, you focus in your body, you say, okay, I mean, your heart's pounding fast. You say, okay, heart pounding fast. What have you come to share? You're going to find something you're really afraid of, like bombs are going off, or your father's going to hit you or something.
Yeah.
There'll be real fear. And when you find the real fear underneath the anxiety, generally the anxiety just goes away.
Nice. Now, you had mentioned earlier about speaking to power, and I'd love if you could speak, because I do think that's a big block for a lot of people. So what are some tips or advice you have around that? How to be able to step in more confidently to be able to speak to power?
It's a short question and a long answer. But basically, you have to understand hierarchy to speak to power. Right?
Okay.
And you have to understand what your true position is vis-a-vis power. Like, I'll tell you a story about my dear co-author, Joni, right? Yeah. When Joni was in her early 20s, right? She was made one of the managers in a factory where no woman had ever been before, right?
Yeah.
She was the first woman in that factory. There were 1,000 men, and there were 4 of them that were brought in under a boss. She walks into her boss's office, and she sees pictures of women masturbating all over the walls.
Yeah.
Do you know what Joni says to her in her early 20s? She says, you're going to take those down. And he says, you're going to make me? And he says, you know, if I'm going to be here, I have to be respected. And if you have pictures like that, you won't be respected. And he said, are you going to make me? And she says that again. And he says, you have a choice. Joni said, you have a choice, because she knew about power. Yeah. And she said, you can take them down yourself, or we can go to HR. Yeah. Because he said she knew he was also someone who was very much into power, right? Yeah. So instead of saying this is what you have to do, she gave him a choice. If you want to speak to power, and people who are very powerful, the thing is you always give them a choice. Yeah. But the choice has to be something you can live with.
Yes.
Yes. You have a choice. You can take them down yourself, or we're going to go to HR. And she knew that she had the power behind her. Yeah. So you have to take a breath and say, really, where am I vis-a-vis what's really happening here if I understand things hierarchically as opposed to being in a stuck place? Yeah. But of course, if your mindset doesn't allow you to do that, then you're going to have to go in and find your fear and stick with the fear until you get to a place where you say, I'm resourced. Yeah. And you get to like really think about the reality of the situation and how much power do you really have? Yeah.
And how do you, if you feel like you don't, what are some ways you can get some leverage or power? And by piggybacking, I love that. Now, I know you speak often about this, you know, understanding the people in our lives sort of from the inside out so that we can have more effective negotiations. So was that just to, again, to clarify, make sure I'm following, is that going back to that sort of archetype process you were talking about? Is there something more to that?
That's going back to the Enneagram. The best way, I studied personality for a long time. I've never seen a tool as good as the Enneagram. It's amazing. And you can read about it very quickly and you'll say, oh my goodness. Like, Joni is an 8 and she was met 2 at 9. And she said, this man makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
And she said, she's a 9. She started reading about 9s, and 8s and 9s are sort of, they're next to each other, right? They're cousins, but they couldn't be
Yeah.
more different because one is the externalization of anger, right?
Yeah.
And one is the dissociation of anger.
Yeah.
So her husband would nothing would ever ruffle him, and nothing you couldn't get to him, and he would just sort of say whatever, and he would never really take initiative. And she said, who is this guy? Because she was like a dynamo,
Yeah.
right? Crazy. And then she gets this book. She said, I'm going to read you this. Does this sound like you? And she reads this whole thing about, I have to take everybody else's point of view and I never want to ruffle any feathers. And because if I did, then, I'd lose my identity. He says, of course. She says, yeah. So it's and then she said, now I have a way I can begin to talk with him because he's not crazy. He actually makes sense. I just think what sense he made.
I love it.
The beauty is everything makes sense.
Yeah.
You just have to understand the sense it makes. It's just someone has a story to tell you. And if you don't know their story, they're going to look nuts.
That's a great line. That's very good. I have to get t-shirts made up with that. That's good. You should patent that. Trademark that. It's awesome. So what do you think are the key skills or hallmarks that make a great negotiator in your view?
I would say the first thing is mindset.
Yeah.
Okay. The second thing is understanding exactly where you're coming from in terms of what are your gifts, what are your challenges, and what's fundamentally motivating you, and knowing the same thing about everybody else, right, that you're with. The third thing is keep quiet. So when you start off, listen, don't speak.
That's good advice.
Because you give people, rope, they will hang themselves. So you always want to know where they're coming from first, if you can. I mean, that just is negotiation 101, but it's really good. The next thing I'd say is always don't focus on position, focus on needs and desires.
Nice.
So that if I know what's motivating you to want something, it's much more important than knowing the thing you want.
Yeah.
So I'd say you always are looking for that. And if you do all those things, you'll probably be pretty good, particularly if you say it's not a big deal.
You'll be way ahead of the curve at that. Absolutely. And especially, I really want to put a pin in for people, that piece about listening, because in North America, we are not taught to listen well, frankly. And in fact, in negotiations, I think we've actually come to believe that the person talking the loudest and longest is winning. And the opposite is true. There are gold nuggets when you sit and listen and truly seek to understand what the other person needs and wants and what's driving them. I love that. Now, as we wrap up here, I know we've talked a lot about mindset, and I usually like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? Doesn't have to be about even this subject, just one of those moments that it's like, aha, you see things differently.
All right, I'll tell you a quick story. I went and visited a friend at a spiritual retreat. The day before I got there, she fell and really hurt her ankle, but she wanted to show me around this retreat center. So she's walking and her ankle is swollen really badly, discolored, and she's in excruciating pain.
Yeah.
We get to this place where we come to these 2 benches, and she says, you're going to have to carry me out of here because I can't walk another step even though I'm leaning on you.
Yeah.
So she sits down on one end of a bench, and I have to walk all the way around to the other end of the bench, which was a strange place to sit. So I could have her elevate her ankle. The second I sit down, I was flooded with it'd be like saying flooded with a lot of suns. And I knew it wasn't the sun because I knew my eyes were closed and I knew where the sun was in the sky. And this light was coming from over my head, not from where the sun was. So I said, it's not the sun. And so I said to her, I said, Roshan, just give me your ankle. I mean, your ankle's here. And I'm just going to start channeling this energy through my hands to your ankle. And I did that for about 5 seconds. She said, I can read auras, don't you? And I said, Roshan, this is 1991. I said, Roshan, I'm a nice Jewish boy from Boston. What do I know from auras? And she said, are you aware that there's pure light coming down through the crown of your head into the center of your chest and out your hands to my ankle?
Wow.
And I said, I can't see it the way that you're talking about, but I know that it's true.
Yeah.
Then I knew it was time to stop. And I looked down and she looks down. There's no swelling. There's no
Wow.
discoloration. She gets up and she walks away and she says, and there's no pain. She can walk without any pain. And I said, we're not in Kansas anymore. I spent the next 2 years of my life going everywhere I could to try to understand what life was trying to reveal to me in that moment.
Yeah.
And I would say that changed my mindset about everything. And I would say ultimately that's the foundation of what I do right now. That there's this energetic in life that is so extraordinary. And we each have our own unique roles to play that are differentiated. But ultimately, we're all that same animating force. And I knew that in that moment. And the second I knew that, my whole mindset changed. And nothing was quite as big a deal afterwards.
That's beautiful. And so powerful. I mean, and it's funny because you think back in the, David, in the 60s or whatever, everybody, I mean, a lot of this was being talked about and everybody dismissed it as hippie talk and woo-woo and crazy. And now the science is finally catching up about a lot of this and the power of it. So where can people find out more about you, Andy? If the audience wants to find out a little bit more about Dr. Andy Hahn, where's the best place for them to go?
They can go to lifecenteredtherapy.com, which is our website. And if they want to read this book called The 1 Hour Miracle that Joni and I wrote, I'm biased, but we've been told by a number of people it's an extraordinarily beautifully written book. And we teach you everything about the nature of life and why we call it life-centered therapy. And we teach you everything you need to know to do your own healing work. We also teach other healers how to do that. And we teach you everything about the Enneagram, that system I told you about.
Yeah.
And we give you how to do it for yourself. And we give you all of these amazing first-person accounts of people who changed their mindset. And it's all in the book and it's fun to read. And then you can do your own healing and your own growth and you can learn about people and everything. So it's called The 1 Hour Miracle. And I hope people get it because it's really interesting.
Oh, it sounds fabulous. Yeah. What were you going to say? Sorry.
It's for I only basically read fiction these days, but there's some stuff in this book that you could say truth is way stranger than fiction.
That's true. Well, we'll make sure to put those in the show notes as well for everybody, both the links and the information about the book. And I just want to really thank you, Andy. It's been a really interesting perspective, I think eye-opening. And for our listeners out there, I invite you to really be open, embrace some of these ideas, practice them, try them, get comfortable with them, because all of life is a negotiation. So thanks so much for sharing with us.
Well, thanks for negotiating this with me. I really appreciate it.
And I'm sure for our listeners, you guys have just got loads of value from this episode. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already done that. And make sure to share this with anyone that you think could get some value. And
one other thing I'd say is if people want to reach me directly, they can reach me. I actually look at my emails. They can just reach me at Hahn, Andy Hahn, AHAHN at lifecenteredtherapy.com. And if you write me, I will write you back.
I love that. That's beautiful. We'll make sure to get that in the show notes as well. Personal invitation. Don't give up that opportunity. And before we sign off today, just want to share some ways that we can work together if you're looking to up-level your negotiation skills. I've got everything from online to group to my signature VIP or mastermind experiences to help you better leverage your innate power to get more of what you want and deserve in life. So if that's interesting, check out theartoffemininenegotiation.com and make sure to grab a copy of my book as well, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, How to Get What You Want from the Boardroom to the Bedroom. Hit Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller status, so feel free to check it out and leave a review. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.